Hello, and now welcome to the coloring and lighting section. We're already in the umbrella of color and lighting, but this is the actual color and lighting. So, you guys can just watch as I draw Belle. You can watch as I use color context to create this reddish environment, this red peachy highlight that is supposed to be the light reflecting upon her and Beast. I'm having the rose petals glow to give that reflection. You guys can see how I have the moon shine behind them, and that bringing the strong, vibrant lighting to the piece. That touch of pop of color. You guys can see how I draw her gown, how I use color in every aspect, darks, lights, all of that jazz. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll be cutting through here or there because this one is a very long video of me just in my environment. This is just how I do my coloring, how I go back and forth. It is bumped up in a lot of speed. I believe this video or this whole painting took about 8 to 15 hours to create. So it is cut down significantly into a lovely hour portion for you people. And you can see how I go back and forth with several tools. I predominantly only use maybe 3 brushes, if that. I use I forget how to ink brush in Clip Studio, which is a free brush you can find. It's a free inking brush, and it is just simply a pen. It is just a black pen, and I use that to sketch. I have a favorite flat brush, which is just a tweaked version of Ahmed Al-Duri's flat brush, which you can find in the link below, but also on his Gumroad website. I also use a soft round brush, which I believe came from Sean Sketch's drawing pack. I believe his brushes are free too. I'll put the link down below. And if it's not, then a simple airbrush can work too if you don't want to spend money on brushes, which I don't recommend. I don't, even though I've bought some, and I'm sure you guys have bought some too, I don't recommend it because at the end of the day, you're more than likely not going to use them like at all. Like I just said, I predominantly use 3 brushes. If it involves textures, I'll use other brushes, but even then it's like another 5 that I use, and it's constantly like the same 5 or variations of that same 5. So I hope you enjoy and learn how I paint something. I'll interject here or there with specifics of what I was thinking or how I did a certain thing, but other than that, enjoy. So I really wanted to showcase how the lighting is hitting them. So I keep going back and forth with turning the backlight on and then the backlight off because while I'm painting, I need to know what will shine and what won't. Eventually, I think I've already done it, but eventually I do stop turning that feature on just so that I can focus on the main part of the painting. That way that if I do have to edit it, I don't have to worry about changing the light here or there. I can just change the light all at once at the very end. So I mainly just focus on coloring and figuring out how both Belle and the Beast will be looking, and most importantly, the dress. My main idea with the dress in this painting is to make it as grand as possible. I really wanted it to be just like the gown for in the movie, but also be a very special wedding gown. Something that also wouldn't be in the movie. You know what I mean? I wanted it to have so many textures but not too much to where it looked strange and messy, but I wanted it to have enough to where it looked like something that someone will want to wear, that someone will want to cosplay as themselves. So I decided to add like a sheer bottom that would have a flowery pattern at the top, kind of trying to attempt roses, but not going into too much detail. So all I used was the simple lasso tool, and I would just use the airbrush or the gradient tool to shade that section. And then on top of that, I would add the texture of the flowers on top. So right now I'm just figuring out what way I wanted to fulfill the texture underneath the sheer part of the dress's texture. I still wanted certain parts of the dress to have a highlight where I knew that the red light was going to eventually hit. So I'm still keeping in mind as I'm coloring, I know that there's going to still be a red, whether it's color dodge or an add layer of red that will eventually hit this dress at certain points, as well as a blue backlight. I'm still keeping in mind, but I also know that I need to color shadows to basically make those highlights pop even more. So there's going to be the rim light of white along the figure, but to make that light pop even more, you should always put a saturated or a darker version of the color that the highlight is hitting on the rim of the light. That way it rounds out the figure and it also makes that highlight pop against the color. I'll reiterate it towards the end of what I mean. At this part, I wanted her collarbones to show, but I realized that her collarbones were a little too strong. So I decided to color them or use an airbrush to blend them back into her skin. And I realized at some point that I didn't quite know what I was doing. So I decided to pull up a reference photo. I'm not sure if I did it then here or later on, but at some point I do pull up a reference photo. It's in my Pinterest in the whole Disney wedding section that I have. And I did pull up the photo of the main gown that I was looking at as reference towards this one. And that one had a really nice bodice to where I was able to see how the collarbones looked on her body, and was able to use that as reference to fix Belle's collarbone issue in this painting. At this point in time, I'm really just trying to block in all the colors. So I'm just using the lasso fill tool to just block in how a beast is supposed to look, and just all the solid colors of what I was expecting what to go where. So all the darker blue, since I did change the color of his suit just a little bit from the lighter blue to the darker blue, and adding shadow to that blue. I think at some point I did have to merge the layers, which for me is a good thing, because I'm seeing 6 layers open. That's too much for me. that's too much. I like to have at least maybe 3 layers, unless it's the only time when I like a lot of layers is special effects layers, and even then I don't even like them open that much, or that many open. So now I'm doing another trick that if I'm really lazy and don't feel like using the gradient tool or the airbrush tool, what I'll do is I'll actually use the lasso fill tool to fill in all the harsh lighting, and then I'll just go back over it with a soft eraser, and I'll erase it to give it that gradient look. It's like a more controlling thing where you have full control of where your brush strokes will go. You know where your painting is going to end up if you have complete control over the brush and just how you use it. Versus, say, with the gradient tool, it literally will just spread everywhere. Like, it will go over completely one side of the canvas to the other, and you don't have like a particular radius that you want that brush to go. So that is just one reason as to why I like using the filler tool. But at the same time, I don't like using the lasso tool. I like using lasso tool, but to fill in with the lasso tool with an airbrush, it takes a lot of time, and to me it's a little too much time, because if you have it open to where it's multiple lassos at once so that you can do the airbrushing, you might as well have had the gradient tool brush open and just done it that way. At this point in time, I had noticed that Belle's newest Disney princess dress had roses as the ruffles at the bottom. Like, it has like a rose design down there. So what I decided to do was recreate that, but with this wedding dress. And I'm not sure if I like it, to be quite honest. But I went with it. But I wanted to still have a ruffle flare open to still show the mesh of the sheer dress underneath. And to do that, I still had to have a ruffle open, because I didn't want it to mimic Tiana's dress, where I've imagined her dress to be just straight down. I wanted Belle's dress to look different and to look like her own. However, looking at it, I do wish maybe I had put in more white into her dress. It looks more just like a upgraded version, or not really an upgraded, because her dress is iconic, but it's more of like maybe like a modernized version of her Disney ball gown. At this point in time, I'm playing around with the lighting of the entire piece, with the backlighting, and then also with Beast's color of his suit, and trying to figure out how things go. I'm trying to figure out the textures of Belle's dress. I believe this is one of the first times where I really messed around with the glitter brush, and I liked how that looked on her dress. So I'm trying to figure out how to add it, but not add too much, because I knew I wanted the other textures to be shown in her dress, like the sheer part underneath of the main dress. I still wanted her sleeves to be see-through. I did still want the gloves to connect and be solid, but I wanted that actual puffy sleeve where her dress falls off the shoulder. I still wanted it to be mesh. So basically what I did with that was I still painted her skin underneath, and then I painted the yellow on top and added the halftone texture and this flowery texture from the Groovy brush that I was able to recreate in Clip Studio, and use a mixture of that brush onto the shoulders as well. I did notice at some point that her neck wasn't looking like it was connecting to, her head wasn't connecting to the rest of her neck. So that's why I changed that. But that's the downside of doing everything on one layer, is that even Beast is on the same layer. So I have to go underneath their entire layer and refill it with the colors that are above and just merge it and paint on top that way. I find that to be the easiest way to clean up after merging all the layers. I thought Belle's dress was a little lopsided, so what I decided to do was add some more part of the puff. But this is what I meant earlier when I said adding a darker color to your highlight. See how that highlight pops even more with that sharp contrast. It's something about it that just makes it look even more of a special highlight. It makes the piece jump out even more, makes you notice it a little bit more. And that's what I want the highlights to do, is to be noticeable throughout the painting. At this point in time is when I realized that I actually want the painting to be a portrait rather than a landscape. I also just didn't feel like taking the time to finish it as a landscape painting, but I also really wanted it to match the Naveen and Tiana. Well, I'm not sure if people would necessarily like this painting all that much in comparison, but for me personally, I wanted it to kind of be like a matching set where all the Disney princess wedding page paintings will be, or all the princess pages will be portrait modes. Like, I'm already planning one for Ariel, and I want that one to be a portrait mode as well. It's just figuring out the dress on that one. Do I do her actual wedding dress and update it, or do I do the silver dress that we unfortunately never got with Hallie? Actually, we never got both dresses with Hallie, but yeah, that's kind of that's the dilemma with that one. So what I'm doing here is literally just filling up that bottom half now that I've stretched it vertically. It's not to the same exact proportions that it was before, so I'm just tweaking it to where it's as accurate as it was before, or not as off-putting as how before it looked natural. This time everything's stretched and thinned, so I have to play around with the settings to get it to look like how it should. There's nothing wrong with copying and pasting something that you've already done. There is nothing wrong. I personally, I knew I couldn't get those roses to be exactly where they should have been and to match the quality of the other ones. So I decided to copy and paste it. I made them. It's fine. Same thing for you. If you need to copy and paste something on yours or in your painting, do it. Don't let anybody say anything negative about it. You painted it. At this point, I'm trying to figure out how to get the roses down because I still wanted the roses to float around them like how I did in the landscaping. However, they just wouldn't come from directly in the jar anymore. So Clip Studio has a rose petal brush. I didn't initially want it. I wanted to use the full rose, but I didn't like how that came out. So I decided to play around with the rose petals, and I kind of like how they turn out. And what I decided to do, or wanted to do in general, was do a ad or a glow ad onto the roses and have it pop on their dress. I knew I wanted it to still be midnight or dark, so I knew a lot of purples and blues were going to be involved, and that I wanted there to be two major accent colors. The white of the moon, and I do use that term loosely because that's not white. That is very much a very, very light blue. But I wanted the white to be the main color used as the rim light, and then I also wanted a red for the roses, and I wanted both of those to have glow effects on both Beast and Belle. At this point, I just used the lasso tool to put in some simple clouds, and what I'll tend to do after that is either erase or use the eraser tool or smudge the clouds instead of like using a blur tool. On this one, I ended up adding more colors in the back because something was off, and I didn't realize until later what it was. I don't quite remember what it was, but one of the layers was off. Oh, the color dodge layer was causing a pattern to show up on the back of the painting, and that tends to happen at some point when you use a little too much of a highlight layer, where all of a sudden there's just a random pattern from underneath like the hardware of whatever device you're using, and that's what happened. It's almost complete, and with that, one minor detail that needed to be added was the light reflecting onto the moon backlight reflecting onto the rose petals. Now, that may have seemed like something that is minor, but it definitely made the rose petals pop a little bit more, and it definitely made them look different than the environment. And at some point in time, I'll blur the rose petals. So now I'm remembering that, oh yeah, the rose petals are glowing. So let me add red to Belle's gown. And at some point, I'm not quite liking it because it's a glow dodge and it's very strong. A glow dodge is like a add that is like a little bit stronger. And I don't tend to like it all that much. And I know I probably didn't give the most accurate description of what a glow dodge is, but that is what it comes off as. But I do take that away at some point and add a better, well, not a better, because I actually do like some aspects of the red on this gown looking back on it, but it was definitely too much. And at this point, I was like, yeah, let's brighten up her dress a little bit. So I did some color dodge on her dress to brighten it up some more. And then I used the eraser tool to bring back some of those darker shadows. You don't have to use a multiply layer on top. All you have to do is just erase. So now I'm just adding highlights onto Beast, but I also realized that I need to reposition him and change him. There's something off about him, and it could just be because he's a beast, but it's just something off. So at some point I do rearrange his body, but I am focusing on other aspects of the painting before I do that. At this point in time, after moving him, I realized also that I would have to change his clothing just a little bit, as well as definitely the highlight behind him. I have to retweak all of that. And I am okay with it. I'm fine with how this turned out in comparison to what it was before. So, and then also all I do is just simply use the lasso tool, the lasso fill tool specifically. And I just use that and drop color within it. And it's not as tedious as it would have been if I were to have painted every single line back in. So now I'm just adding some detail into his suit and figuring out what patterns I want him to have. Just like with the Naveen suit, I wanted him to have something matching of bells, and I figured out that I'm just going to do the same thing where I give him kind of flowery edges on the edge of his suit, top shoulder pads of his suit. Just give slight flowers. I also considered a cape with him as well, since I think Adam does have a cape, and I decided not to because I more than likely would have had it the other way than her veil, and that wouldn't have made sense because of the wind. And then also I didn't want it to block the moon, so I decided to ex-nay on the cape. So now it's just literally the finishing touches where I'm adding textures. I have already added the mesh texture onto the veil. I've added a little bit of the flower textures onto the veil. And now I'm just tweaking the veil and getting rid of some of it. Because now I realize that Beast is a little off center. And that at this point in time that she's not looking at him. I do need to go back though, because I don't think he's looking at her. But I needed to change the layout of Beast's body, because now that he's in a different position, it's not he's too wide. I need to figure out what to do with his arm, because before his arm was fine. I was initially thinking to, like, in the very, very first sketches before I came up with this final one, I was thinking of having his arm around her waist, but at the same time I was like, that's gonna block the dress. and I was like, I really want to focus on the dress, so that's why that never came to be. What I want you guys to think about and learn from watching how I do my paintings is how to bring a character or an object into an environment and how to get those colors to match the environment. So say an apple, you can paint an apple or draw an apple and have it in the coloring environment that is, like, say, blue. How does a red apple change its color in a blue environment? I want you guys to think about how that happens, and I want you guys to test how that happens. I'll have a couple of objects and food in the description, and I want you guys to take those things and give them highlights, make them pop, make them have vibrancy and color in comparison to what it is. and test out your color theory on it. Test out your color context and your saturation and your desaturation, and just play with it. And of course, have fun with it.